Imagine standing in the middle of an open plain at midnight. No trees, no walls, no electricity. The ground beneath your feet is frozen solid. The wind doesn't just blow, it cuts. And the temperature outside is dropping past -50 degrees Celsius. You have wool, you have fire, you have animals. That is all. Now ask yourself honestly, could you survive until morning? Most people today would say no, and they would be right. Because surviving in conditions like these doesn't just require equipment. It requires a completely different way of thinking about the world. A different relationship with the land, with animals, with cold itself. The Mongolian steppe stretches across more than 800,000 square kilometers of open grassland in Central Asia, one of the largest and most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. In winter, Siberian air masses push temperatures to extremes that are difficult to fully comprehend. In Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia's capital, winter temperatures routinely drop below -30 degrees Celsius. In the rural steppe, away from any shelter or settlement, conditions can fall to -50 degrees Celsius or beyond, cold severe enough to freeze exposed skin within minutes. And yet, for more than 1,000 years, nomadic Mongol families have not simply survived this environment, they have mastered it. But here is the question that truly matters. Not just how they kept their bodies warm, but something far deeper. What does it mean to be truly warm? Not just in body, but in spirit. Hold that question, because by the end of this story, you will have an answer that no modern heating system could ever give you. Long before the first snow touches the steppe, something quietly extraordinary is already happening. Experienced herders begin reading the land with a precision that takes generations to develop. The direction of the wind shifting across the grassland, the particular dryness carried in the northern air, the subtle change in color along distant ridgelines. These are not random observations. They are a language, one written not in ink, but in frost and wind, refined over more than 1,000 years of living and dying on these plains. For a nomadic family, choosing the location of a winter camp is perhaps the single most consequential decision of the entire year. A wrong choice carries consequences that no amount of courage or strength can overcome. A valley too exposed to northern winds becomes a corridor of frozen air. Snowdrifts can bury entire grasslands beneath thick sheets of ice, leaving animals with nothing to graze on for weeks. In the winter of 2009 to 2010, a catastrophic weather event known as a dzud, a combination of summer drought followed by extreme winter freezing, swept across Mongolia. More than 8.5 million livestock animals died. Entire herding families lost everything they had built across generations. That is the price of choosing wrong. But the steppe, despite its appearance, is not simply a flat and featureless plain. Those who know how to read it discover something remarkable. Hidden valleys that weaken the force of the wind. Rocky ridgelines that naturally deflect powerful storm currents sweeping in from Siberia. Southern slopes where winter sunlight lingers fractionally longer, warming the ground just enough to soften the snow above. Experienced herders search for what many describe as the shadow of the mountain, a location where the shape of the land itself becomes a shield, where the terrain does the work that no man-made wall could do more effectively. This was not instinct. This was not luck. This was a science, one without laboratories or textbooks, written instead in frost and wind and survival across more than 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom. But reading the land was only the first secret. The second secret was alive, it was breathing, and it was standing on 4 legs. Every autumn, something ancient stirs across the Mongolian steppe. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. The wind shifts direction. The grass loses its color. The animals grow restless in a way that no herder needs to explain to another. And then, across the vast open plains, the movement begins. Thousands of animals flowing steadily across the landscape, horses with their thick winter coats already forming against the coming cold. Dense flocks of sheep and goats grazing as they travel, each step carrying them further from the summer pastures. Sturdy cattle pushing forward into the wind, camels carrying the weight of an entire household on their backs. The wooden frames, the felt coverings, the stove, the tools, the accumulated life of a family that has never needed permanent walls. From a distance, it looks almost like a river, a living river, slow and deliberate, moving across a frozen ocean of grass. But these animals were never simply livestock. On the Mongolian steppe, the herd is not something a family owns. It is something a family belongs to. According to traditional herding knowledge passed down across generations, a family is generally considered to need somewhere in the range of 200 sheep, or their equivalent in mixed livestock, to produce enough food, fuel, wool, and warmth to carry a household through a single winter. The exact number shifts with the severity of the season and the size of the family, but the principle behind it does not. Meat and milk for food, wool and hides for clothing and insulation, dung for fuel, horses for movement and communication, body heat for the coldest nights. These animals were not property. They were partners, bound to their human families by the oldest contract ever written, not recorded on paper or stone, but inscribed in the shared experience of survival itself, renewed every single winter across more than 1,000 years. Timing this migration demanded a kind of judgment that cannot be learned from books. Leave too early, and valuable weeks of autumn grazing are lost. Weeks when animals should be building the fat reserves they will desperately need by January. Leave too late, and a sudden early snowstorm can trap the herd in open ground, turning the landscape into something far more dangerous than cold alone. Generations of observation shape these decisions. Families read the clouds, the wind, the behavior of birds. Subtle signals passed down not as written instructions but as lived knowledge, carried quietly from parent to child across centuries. And when they finally reached their chosen ground, the first thing they built was not shelter for themselves. It was a system. Families positioned their gers, the circular felt homes at the heart of nomadic life, not randomly, but with remarkable intentionality. Arranged in circles or tight U-shaped formations, each structure placed in deliberate relationship to the next. The result was not simply a collection of homes. It was an engineered environment, a unified barrier designed to reshape the climate within the camp itself. The doors of every ger faced south or southeast. This single decision captured what little warmth the winter sun offered, while turning the back of each structure directly against the dominant northern winds sweeping down from Siberia. The shelters stood close enough together that their walls formed a continuous low barrier, slowing the icy air currents racing across the open steppe. And within that protected ring, something remarkable happened. A pocket of calmer air began to form, fractionally warmer, fractionally more still. A microclimate, shaped not by technology, but by geometry and generations of understanding. Modern architects and climate engineers recognize this approach as a cornerstone of sustainable building theory, the deliberate use of structure, orientation, and natural airflow to regulate temperature without mechanical systems. It is considered one of the most effective principles in low-energy design. Mongol herders had been applying it for over 1,000 years before modern architecture gave it a name. But the camp's most powerful heat source had not yet arrived. As evening fell and the temperature began its rapid descent toward the most dangerous hours of the night, the animals were guided inward, moving slowly through the outer ring of gers and filling the protected space at the heart of the settlement. Hundreds of bodies pressing together, hundreds of sources of warmth, each small on its own, combining into something the wind could not easily take away. The second secret had arrived, and the real battle, the one fought in darkness and silence and cold, was only just beginning. Step inside a Mongolian ger, and you step into one of the most quietly brilliant survival systems ever created by human hands. From the outside, it appears almost deceptively simple. A low circular structure, no taller than a person standing with one arm raised. No sharp corners, no heavy walls, no stone foundation anchoring it to the earth. To an unfamiliar eye, it might look fragile, something the wind could dismantle in minutes. That impression would be completely wrong. The circular shape is not aesthetic, it is engineering. When the brutal winter winds of Central Asia sweep across the open steppe, they do not strike the ger the way they would strike a flat wall. They have nothing to push against. The curved surface redirects airflow smoothly around the structure, significantly reducing both wind pressure and heat loss from the exterior surface. Architects and structural engineers recognize this as a fundamental principle of aerodynamic building form, one that reduces wind load on a structure without requiring any additional material or reinforcement. The herders of the Mongolian steppe understood and applied it long before it was ever written into an engineering textbook. The frame itself consists of a collapsible wooden lattice, flexible yet structurally sound, with long poles rising from the lattice walls to meet a central roof ring that locks the entire structure into a single unified form. Sections are connected using leather cord and hand-fitted joints, requiring no nails and no permanent fixings. An experienced family can fully assemble a ger of standard size from bare ground in roughly 2 to 3 hours, a feat that still impresses engineers and architects who study portable structures today. Wrapped around this frame are thick layers of felt, a compressed wool material produced directly from the fleece of the sheep the family herds. Felt is not simply warm. Within its dense, compressed fibers exist countless microscopic air pockets, each one slowing the transfer of heat between the warm interior and the frozen world outside. The insulating properties of wool felt have long been recognized as exceptional among natural materials, capable of retaining warmth effectively even when the temperature differential between inside and outside reaches extreme levels. During the most severe winter storms, additional layers are added, wrapping the ger in a thermal barrier that the cold struggles to penetrate. At the center of the interior stands a small iron stove, positioned directly beneath the only opening in the roof above. As the fire burns, warm air rises naturally and circulates outward through the living space, creating an even distribution of heat across the entire interior without any mechanical assistance. Smoke escapes upward through the roof opening, maintaining a balance between warmth and breathable air that required centuries of lived refinement to perfect. The fuel feeding that fire comes from a source that surprises almost every outsider who encounters it for the first time: dried animal dung. On a treeless steppe where firewood is essentially non-existent across hundreds of kilometers, the waste produced by the herd becomes one of the most reliable and carefully managed resources in the entire survival system. Known in Mongolian as argal, it has been used as fuel across Central Asia for centuries. Collected throughout the warmer months, dried slowly in the open air, and stored before winter arrives, it burns steadily and slowly, producing sustained heat across the long frozen hours of the night, rather than a brief intense flame that collapses quickly into ash. Nothing in the system is wasted. Nothing exists for only a single purpose. The interior layout of the ger reflects this same precision. The area nearest the door is the coldest zone. Cold air from outside sinks and settles there whenever the entrance is opened. Sleeping areas are positioned along the back walls, where warmth accumulates most reliably through the night. Storage spaces hold additional blankets, felt coverings, and layered furs that can be deployed quickly when storms intensify beyond expectation. Every element serves the same quiet purpose: keep warmth inside, keep life alive. But here is what most people never consider when they look at a ger and see only felt and wood and fire. The most sophisticated piece of technology in the entire winter camp was not the stove. It was not the felt. It was not even the carefully engineered shape of the structure surrounding them. It was something far older than any of those things. Something that required no assembly, no materials, no fuel beyond what the body itself produces simply by being alive. Human warmth. Perhaps the most ancient comfort our species has ever known. Long before insulated walls or engineered stoves, before any technology humanity has since invented or forgotten, there was this: one body close to another, sharing what little heat the night was trying to take away. When darkness falls completely across the Mongolian steppe, and the temperature accelerates toward its lowest point of the night, the most important thing inside a ger is not the stove burning at its center. It is the people sleeping around it. No one sleeps alone. Not a single person in a Mongol winter camp surrenders themselves to the cold in isolation. Parents, children, grandparents, relatives, everyone lies close together beneath heavy layered blankets of wool and fur, their bodies creating a shared thermal environment that no single person could generate alone. Thick robes remain on their bodies through the night, adding insulation that does not depend on the stove maintaining its heat until morning. The physics behind this are straightforward. Multiple bodies sharing a confined sleeping space generate collective heat that measurably raises the temperature of the immediate area, enough, in conditions this extreme, to represent a meaningful difference in comfort and safety. The exact degree varies with the number of people, the insulation surrounding them, and the severity of the night. But the principle has been understood and practiced by cold climate peoples across the world for as long as humans have faced winter together. The sleeping platforms inside the ger are raised slightly above the ground, a detail so simple it is easy to overlook. and so important it could not be removed without consequence. The frozen earth beneath the shelter does not simply stay cold. It actively draws heat downward, pulling warmth from any body resting directly against it throughout the entire night. The raised platform, covered with thick felt mats and animal hides, breaks that connection, creating a layer of insulation between human warmth and the ground's silent, patient hunger for it. And then, on the coldest nights, the nights when even a well-managed ger and a sleeping family pressed together might not be entirely enough, something else happens. The animals come inside. Newborn lambs, young goat kids, the most fragile members of the herd, whose bodies are not yet capable of generating sufficient warmth to survive the most extreme temperature drops on the open steppe. They are carried through the door of the ger and settled into the living space alongside the family. To modern sensibilities, this might seem unusual, perhaps even uncomfortable. But consider what it actually represents. A family, in the deepest darkness of a -50 night, choosing to share the only warmth they have with the most vulnerable creatures in their care. The line between human survival and animal survival, between what we call civilization and what we call nature, does not exist inside that ger. There is only warmth, and the shared effort to preserve it until morning. In that single image, something profound becomes visible about what these people understood that the modern world has largely forgotten. Survival was never an individual achievement. It was always a collective one. And yet, even with all of this, even with the perfectly positioned camp, the engineered ger, the biological heat of the herd gathered at the center, the sleeping family pressed together beneath layers of wool and fur, the newborn animals sharing the interior warmth, even with all of it working together exactly as it was designed to work, on the very coldest nights, it was sometimes still not enough. That truth is important to hold, because it is the thing that most modern retellings of ancient survival leave out. These were not superhuman people immune to suffering. They were families, cold, exhausted, worried about their animals, worried about their children, doing everything their accumulated knowledge told them to do, and sometimes watching the temperature drop past the point where knowledge alone could carry them through. What carried them through on those nights was something that no engineering, no felt layer, no circular camp formation could manufacture or replace. It was the knowledge that the people beside them had survived this before, that their parents had survived it, that their grandparents had survived it, and that the same land that was trying to freeze them tonight had been trying, and failing, to break their families for more than 1,000 years. That knowledge was warm in a way that fire alone could never be. And when spring finally returned to the steppe, when the snow softened and the first thin grass pushed upward through the thawing ground, the gers came down within hours. The wooden frames folded, the felt layers were packed onto horses and camels. The settlement that had protected an entire community through the most brutal months of winter vanished from the landscape almost without a trace. Almost. Because one thing never got packed away, never got loaded onto a camel, or folded into a bundle. The knowledge itself remained. Passed from the people who survived to the children who would one day face the same darkness, the same cold, the same long night on the open steppe. In recent years, Mongolia has continued to face severe drought events, the devastating combination of summer drought, followed by extreme winter freezing, that can kill livestock in enormous numbers. Observers working with herding communities have noted that families maintaining traditional winter practices, careful site selection, proper camp formation, the full range of inherited knowledge, tend to fare better through these events than those who have moved away from them. It is a pattern that researchers and aid organizations have increasingly recognized as they work to support herding communities through climate-driven winters that are growing less predictable with every passing decade. 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom, still working, still warm. There is a question that has been waiting since the very beginning of this story. What does it mean to be truly warm? Not just in body, but in spirit. The Mongolian steppe has an answer, and it is not the answer most people expect. It is not about the thickness of your walls. It is not about the efficiency of your heating system. It is not about the technology surrounding you, the resources available to you, or the distance between yourself and the nearest source of electricity. The Mongols did not survive 1,000 winters by building stronger barriers against the cold. They survived by understanding the cold so completely, so intimately, that they stopped fighting it altogether. They learned to read its language. They learned to move with it rather than against it. They learned to use the very forces that threatened to destroy them: wind, terrain, animal warmth, human closeness, as the foundation of a survival system that many who study it today consider among the most elegant ever developed by a people living without permanent infrastructure. To be truly warm, it turns out, means knowing exactly where you stand. It means knowing who stands beside you. It means listening, carefully, patiently, without arrogance, to what the land beneath your feet is trying to tell you. In a world increasingly shaped by rising temperatures, unpredictable winters, and climate patterns that no existing infrastructure was built to handle, that wisdom is not ancient history, it is instruction. The gers have come down, the camps have disappeared. The steppe has returned to its vast, open silence, but the knowledge remains, it always has. And perhaps that is the most important thing the Mongolian winter teaches us, not just about survival, but about what it means to be human in a world that has never, in any era, ever been fully under our control. If stories like this move something in you, stories of ancient ingenuity, of human endurance, of the quiet wisdom that ordinary people carried across centuries of cold and darkness and uncertainty, then you already know why this channel exists. This is Survival of the Old World. We don't chase legends. We don't romanticize the past. We ask the only question that has ever truly mattered: how did they survive? And what does that mean for us, right now? Every story we tell here is a layer of felt, wrapped around something the modern world has forgotten it needs. Stay with us, because the old world still has things to teach.